on and we were talking about the Atomic Shakespeare episode of Moonlighting, and I know you had done acting as an actor. You had done Shakespeare with Joseph Papp. And
I had, yes. I was in that wonderful production, Much Ado About Nothing, with Sam Waterston and Kathleen Widdows and my dear, dear friend Barnard Hughes and Doug Watson. We started as a show in the park. I'd done a couple of things. I did As You Like It for him in Central Park. It was that free Shakespeare, in Central Park. And then this phenomenal production of Much Ado About Nothing that A.J. Antoon directed, who had directed Championship Season for Joe Papp. And it just got this huge success, so we moved it to the Winter Garden Theater on Broadway. This was before Cats ever opened on Broadway. And we ran there for about 6 months, and then we made a CBS special out of it. And my friend Nick Havinga turned out to be our director, who ended up letting me observe when I was one of many directors, but he let me observe with him. But even by then I think I can't remember what year that was, but anyway, but I had done that. I'd done As You Like It. I'd been at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival when I'd gotten out of college. In college, I'd done a lot of Shakespeare. When I was in college, I was an apprentice at the American Shakespeare Festival in Stratford, and as I said, my mom taught Shakespeare, so I was really familiar with a lot of the stuff. So, I think it helped. And the other thing that helped, quite honestly, is that Jeff and Ron, who wrote that script, it was never rewritten by Glenn Caron. And Glenn Caron rewrote all of our Moonlightings, and that's, I know, why it was as successful as it was. But on this one episode, it was all in iambic pentameter, so he couldn't rewrite it, really. And it helped us, so we were able to get as much prep done. We shot over on the European Street at Universal. And Sybil and Bruce were just unbelievably cooperative. They loved the premise. And I think it's again, one of those things, you take a chance. It could have been the biggest flop in the world. It's like the Scrubs musical that we'll get to at some point. But when you're doing it, you go, this is either going to be a disaster or a big success. And thank God it turned out well. But I have to say, I had so much help. We had 2 units. Sometimes we had 3 units doing some extra stuff. But basically, I worked with Sybil and Bruce on the whole thing and did the A unit. But Jay Daniel, thank God, came in, and because we were getting way behind. And you talk about over budget, and Sybil's costumes had to all be taken apart because they were itchy and they were specially made for her. They had to have moleskin put in, so that delayed us. And we were building sets at the last minute over there and doing huge amounts of construction work and things like this. But we had a crane. The opening is this wonderful crane Steadicam, and it was in the early days of Steadicam. But that opening shot, there's a Steadicam operator on a crane that comes down, and it opens out of a picture, and then you come down, and then the Steadicam operator got off the crane and goes right through and picks up Bruce Willis in that opening. And a lot of the stunts were very, very complex with the horses and the kicking, and Chris Howell did wonderful help on that. Jay, it was again like any of the famous stuff that I've done, the Family Ties, My Name is Alex, and the Scrubs musical. It's a group effort. It is really a group effort, and you like to think you're the one that's the ringleader, and you're getting them to do their best work. And I've found that most of the stuff that I do, I want to be the director, but I want the wardrobe people to tell me their opinion of what they think, and this is what I will always do. What do you think is best? What do you think? Should Gary be in the green sweater or the brown sweater? Well, what's the wall? He's going to be sitting against a white wall. Well, then the green might, but it gets all the departments involved creatively, rather than you're this auteur who says, by God, it's going to be my way or the highway, and I don't work that way. So anyway, that was a group effort, and it turned out to be phenomenal. And the joy of it, my parents are gone now, but the joy of it was the DGA dinner. Carl Reiner was the host, and it was at the Universal Hilton. It was one of the few DGA dinners at the... And anyway, the fire alarm went off in the middle of Red Button's Toastmaster thing, and it was a joke. And it was a very relaxed, wonderful evening. And my parents came, and they were there, along with a table of friends. And I won. And I got to thank my mom and dad in person, because it's not aired on television. And it was very important to me to be able to thank them, not only because she had taught Shakespeare, but my parents were so encouraging about letting me do what my heart savored, and that's what I've told all of my children, and I will tell my grandchildren, and I tell people that are in the business that if you can't do anything else, I had a friend who came to me once. I can't decide to be a lawyer or an actor, and I said, "Well, be a lawyer then." But it's you have to have that passion, as you well know, that the competition is so fierce in this business that if you have any doubts about what you're doing, then somebody else is going to take your place immediately who doesn't have any doubts, and so you got to go for it, and you try to get that in all the people you work with. That you want them to share your passion as well. So
now, in particular scenes in the Shakespeare show
yes.
Stand out to you in terms of challenges or that you thought came off well?
God, I can't remember now, Gary, at all. It's terrible.
I know there's an elaborate scene in the church where he sings.
Oh God, yes, and he sings "Good Lovin'."
Yeah.
Oh. And I staged that. I mean, I staged it. But my wife is a choreographer, dancer, and she's at home, and we did this on the musical too. She'll give me thoughts, and she'll give me ideas, and we played the tape at home a lot, because I didn't know that song, quite honestly, and Glenn gave me a tape of it, and he said, but I want them in the pews, and let them do whatever you want them to do. And so, yeah, that was a fabulous scene. And Bruce rode down the aisle on his horse, and they're all singing "Good Lovin'," stuff like that. And Sybil was tied to the, and that was Jay Daniels' thought. He said it would be a great beginning if you start on the bindings of her hand. Her hands are bound in the beginning, and try maybe starting on the binding and pulling out and coming around. And it's a neat opening to a shot. It's when the hunchback is ringing the bell in the thing. I don't go back. It's one of those things my dad taught me about. But you can't go home again. And I can, but I haven't seen that show in whatever it's been 20 years. And once in a great while there'll be a Raymond on TV. We watch Channel 5, and I'll suddenly be on it for a little while. I go, God, this is, and it'll bring back, but it's very hard for me to go back, and that's psychological. Some shrink could tell me why that is. I'm not sure, but just now remembering that was a great scene, and there were a couple of other scenes that we didn't rehearse any of that ahead of time. We rehearsed on the fly, just like we did a regular moonlighting. They had the script, they memorized that, and they knew that because they had never done that kind of verse before. And we talked a little about what they meant and how I wanted to block it, and they were very, very cooperative about the blocking and stuff. But there was a lot of physical stuff I can remember. And also Curtis Armstrong and Elise had a lovely thing going there too. And they loved their bits and things like that. So
how'd they take to the Shakespeare?
Fabulous. Mm-hmm. I think Curtis had done Shakespeare, but and then we had an actor, Colm Meaney, who's become huge. Yeah. He has one line or two lines. I remember him coming in and auditioning. I think he's Irish, but I've seen him now recently going, good God, that's cool. And I remember him coming in for the audition for whatever, he played a courtier, I think, one of the suitors to Bianca. And so it was so neat to see somebody who had a bit. That's happened to me several times of this person that just had a bit, and it was like one of their first or second jobs, and bam, they become very big.
Before we leave moonlighting, there's one other thing I wanted to ask. The show had a lot of, it would end frequently with chase sequences. I know you did one where I think she's being pushed in a wheelchair.
That's right. I can
Bruce.
remember. And he, one thing I remember is Glenn loves parking garages. We did a lot of stuff in parking garages and chase scenes in parking garages. He still said he finds parking garages very scary. I don't know whether it's the fact that you, first of all, can't find your car and somebody's coming after you, you can't remember where you parked, but it adds that element of danger. So I remember doing a couple of things there, and you can also do lots of tire screeching and stuff, and it's safe in a way. You can buy out the garage for the day, and then you can shoot all over the place. But yeah, yes, I think, was it The Bride of Tupperman or whatever, where the bag, the bag of money or something goes down a chute. And I remember outside of that, we did a chase, a wonderful chase, where he jumps into a car, and I think she was riding shotgun or something like that. And we had a stunt double doing her stuff. But these are things that I hadn't done a lot on Scarecrow and on Remington. We had a little bit of stunts, but Glenn loved to do those stunts on that. And I learned a lot. It's like working with a choreographer when you're doing a musical. Chris Howell was phenomenal help, because not only would he stage it, but he'd tell me where to put my cameras. This will look great if you do this, and I can, this guy can shoot a fist up to him, and you'll never see it if your camera's over here. So I'd, of course, do what he told me, and or you'd use an IMO and be really, really low, and then it would kill the shot on the ground, and you couldn't have an operator there, obviously. But so I learned as I went. I learned as I experienced that stuff.
And how much of the look was the work of Gerald Finnerman?
Jerry Finnerman and Robert Tortorisi, who did the wardrobe, fantastic, and oh God, I wish I could remember his name. The set designer was great. I mean, those three people, I think, gave it a tremendous look. And I'm sure it was Glenn, too. Glenn, who, like with the medium now, Glenn has a definite vision for what he wants in a show. And he is vehement about that. And that, to me, it's Glenn Caron's show. I mean, it always will be. The pace of it, the sexual attraction that they had to each other, the casting of it, the look, the lighting, the look that he wanted, and Sybil and her famous, diffused, what was it? The lens, the diffused lens that she liked to have. She'd always say, "But he's gonna look like my son. I've got to have that. He can't. That's not fair." So, but they bought it, and then we did a big joke about it. I remember one time they had an interview for
it was Rhoda Barrett
Entertainment Tonight or
Rhoda
something.
Barrett.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she said, "I'm not ready yet." And then she comes out with holding this whole screen in front of her. So she had a great sense of humor about her. She does.
Okay, we're going to move on to some other shows.
Yes.
You did a bunch of episodes of Caroline in the City.
I did.
What was
I
the
love that.
experience like on that show?
It was great. Leah's lovely. I see her a lot over there when I take my walks. I, again, came in, I think it was in the second year, and I just did a couple and got along with everybody, and so came back and had a wonderful time. I loved Malcolm Getz because Malcolm came out of the theater, and he's a brilliant pianist, And he said, "You like musical theater, don't you?" We're at location sometime. He said, "You love musical theater. What's your favorite musical?" I said, "Brigadoon." Well, because I'm a Scot. And so he sits down at the piano by rote and by memory, plays the score to Brigadoon. I was like, holy God. Amy Peets, whom I'd had in a pilot long before, she'd done a pilot with me, Muscle, it was the first pilot for the WB. And Amy Peets was in that, and then she was a regular on this. And, sorry about this. That's Patsy's thing. Anyway, she did... Leah was just lovely. The writers were really nice. Marco Panett, that I got along with very well. And again, we had a lovely crew. And it was a a lot of fun to do that show. And I went from that to doing a couple of Conrad Blooms, I think, because they were all working on Conrad Bloom, because Linda Lavin was a friend and a close associate. So I like working with people who want to be there, for one thing, and Leah Thompson and that gang liked what they did. She realized she had a great thing going, and she went. The few times that I have never lost my temper, but the few times I've gotten irritable are when the actor doesn't want to be there and wants to be someplace else and doesn't want to do the work. You know, even if they don't like the script, will at least try to make it work. You know, I don't have the talent, for one thing, or the permission to rewrite the script. I can suggest new jokes and things like that, but I think it's my job as a director they give me a script, I've taken the job, I want to make that script the best possible so they can see the flaws in it. This is its best staging possible. This is the best behavior. These are the best line readings. These are the best characters. Now, you go out and fix it. You get the script better. But that's my job. And so the few times that an actor has said, yeah, I'd rather not be here right now. Well, let's make it. Let's work on it a little longer until we can make it right. But anyway, Caroline was a very pleasant experience.
Then you started to work on Everybody Loves Raymond.
Oh,
how did you get started on that series?
That was great. I got the man who was the line producer said, and this has happened a couple of times, they'd had other directors, I guess, who were more technically oriented, and Ray had never acted before. You know, Ray was a stand-up, and Patty Heaton I knew very well. So Patty Heaton and this line producer went to Phil Rosenthal, who was fairly new in the business, in that game. He'd been a writer on Coach. And they took me to breakfast. And Patty and Stu had said, you ought to meet Will Mackenzie. He works with actors, and he might be nice. And I was directing a series with Tom Selleck at the time. And so I went to breakfast with Phil, and the show hadn't been a hit. I think it was the second year I joined it. And they hire you kind of cautiously for 2 or 3, and we got along great. Because Patty I'd done Room for Two with, and so she was very friendly. And Ray, the great thing about Ray Romano, I think, and I've worked with a lot of stand-ups, Bob Newhart, but lots of others, they just really want the laughs, and that's their form of love. But the reason Bob Newhart succeeds and that Ray Romano has succeeded is that he listens. And he's learned the art of listening through, and I give the credit mostly to Patricia Heaton, who is a fabulous actress. She'll do comedy, drama, everything. And the fact that she's as petite as she is, she can get furiously mad, and you still love her for it. And she and Ray got along really well. And he listened to Patty Heaton tell her things about the acting business and about the essence of listening. And I told him this. I think Phil Rosenthal was an actor too, and so Ray listened, and he listened to Peter Boyle, and he became fabulous in those. I joined it in the second year, and I did the third year and the fourth year, and I did most of them those years. And again, that's probably one of the best shows ever worked, because it's the best written show. I think that and Family Ties, Moonlighting. But the writing was so superb on Everybody Loves Raymond, and the cast was
What was the work week on on Raymond?
It was just like Family Ties.
Mm-hmm.
It was more tense. There was more tension on that show that I don't really want to go into, but it was the cast got along, but there was a lot of hurt feelings and things like that. But basically, they came in with 13 scripts written at the beginning of the season. I've never been on a show like that. That he'd get his writers to write these scripts, and they'd be polished and ready to go, so that Phil and Jeremy Stevens and all of those writers would be able to devote their week to that episode, not what's happening in 3 months, because they already had 13, and then they were playing with episode 20 and 22 already, and we were in August. We were at the beginning of the season. So their writing was so good that they could come back after the run-through. But we do the same thing. We'd start on a Monday, I think, or no, when I went in there, we shot on Tuesdays. So we'd do a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then camera block Monday, and shoot on Tuesday. And the actors liked that because they could learn their lines over the weekend. And I love that schedule myself, too. And you get a really good camera crew if you work on a Tuesday, because you can get people who are on Jimmy Burrows shows on Friday. Friday, you get the A group who are doing a show Friday. They'll come to you on Monday and Tuesday because they're not working. So, yeah, it was basically the same. You'd do the reading, you'd block, you'd go home. I would go back to the writer's room. I wasn't as involved by then with the writers as I was on Family Ties, but they were very encouraging. Come back, tell us the problems that the actors are having, all of that stuff. But those actors had a very close relationship with Phil Rosenthal. I mean, Ray came back to the room because he was a co-producer and a writer. It was about his life. It's an Italian and a Jewish background getting together. That to me was the success of that show. That they're both into their emotions and their close family ties and all of that. So
what was the work working with that ensemble? You had veterans like Peter Boyle.
Fabulous.
And newcomers like Ray.
Yeah, and Peter, as Ray said in his eulogy to Peter Boyle, he was like a father figure to him because his family was all back in New York, and Peter's was in New York, and he and Ray were both staying, I think, at the Gardens, over on Barham Boulevard there. They both had these little apartments, and they used to have dinners to Peter, and Phil was always down on Doris because Doris reminded him of his own mother. I think that's public knowledge, so there was a lot of friction there. But Doris was phenomenal. And, of course, Peter, I'd done a pilot with Peter before that didn't go, but I loved Peter Boyle. Yeah, and Patty and Ray, and then Brad, who just blossomed on that show. He, again, was like Ray. In the beginning, he wants those laughs. He's a stand-up. And he wasn't quite as secure as Ray was in the beginning. But he started listening, and he started playing that character, that brother who had problems, all these problems. And they wrote beautifully for him. So he, again, was becoming an actor, not just a stand-up. And you get an actor who has that kind of sense of humor, who can mine comedy in anything. He's just a joy. And I think his first Emmy nomination, or Emmy win, I had directed, which was this episode called Robert's Date, which is one of the best Raymonds that I ever did. Was a great episode. He and Sherry Shepard, who's on The View now, they were partners. They're policemen, and she's black and he's white, and he has no social life, so she convinces him he's got to go to this black nightclub. And Phil Rosenthal got the greatest kick out of coming down to the run-through because I am teaching the electric slide to an entire a group of black extras. And I can't believe they don't know the electric slide, but they don't. So we're learning it, and it's a club, and Sherry comes in and starts dancing. So I'm up there, and by this time I'm like 55 years old, and there's all these young black kids, and I'm teaching them the electric slide. And we're playing it, and the crew filmed it. It's just ludicrous. And Phil Rosenthal got the greatest kick out of this. And then Brad comes in, and of course he ends up doing his Jerry Lewis herky-jerky dance, and Brad moves brilliantly. So Brad just did his thing. And it's basically a wonderful moral episode because right after that, Brad buys this orange, suit, and he is talking, jargon. He's got the accent. He is black. He wants to be African American, and everything. What's going, my brother, and all this stuff. And Ray has to take him aside and say, you're an Italian, and it's okay to have your Italian heritage and to admire your African-American friends. And it has this wonderful message, but it is one of the funniest episodes I ever directed. That Phil and the writers would come up with lots of alternate lines, but in front of the audience, he's sitting in his orange suit, and he's so frustrated, and he says, "Do you know where I got this suit?" And Ray had 20 answers to Gulden's. I don't know what the line was they finally ended up with, but everything that was orange, Ray thought of, or the writers did. And Brad couldn't get the answer out because he was laughing. So no, Phil was very strict. I mean, it really had to be scripted. There were alternates that we always try, but there was no ad-libbing at all. It was very, very tightly run, very tightly run show. And Phil Rosenthal, I give all of the credit for the brilliance of that show. It's just amazing.
Were you there when they filmed that, or did you film the bull chasing him?
No.
Okay.
Wasn't that funny?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right outside, right out at Warner Brothers. I know they did that.
Another episode you did, the Christmas picture.
I did.
Which had in-laws.
That was kind of fun with Bob Culp and dear Catherine Hellman. Yeah. And I think that got an Emmy nomination. Did it get an Emmy nomination?
Yes.
I think it did. I was amazed. I was very lucky on that, I felt. But it was fun because the show moved. And again, you go back to blocking and stuff. None of that was in. And, I just tried to move it. And it was in some photography studio, I think, and I haven't seen that in a long time either. But it was fun, and it moved along. And it was a gossipy kind of episode with Bob and Catherine. Patty. I call her Patty Hellman because that was her nickname when she was in Providence at the Trinity Square Playhouse.
And one of the writers, Lou Schneider, was...
Lou Schneider played the photographer. Yes, Lou the actor. Did a nice job, too. That happens. That happens on Scrubs. There's one of the writers on Scrubs, he's like a recurring. He's the delivery man, the UPS delivery man on Scrubs, and he's a writer on the show, too. So it's nice when the guys have acted before and they get a chance to do this. So.
There's another kind of well-known episode called Boob Job that Patricia Heaton did. Can you talk a little bit about doing that one?
Yeah, because Patty Heaton had a boob job before, and I think she didn't know, and that's public knowledge because she's gone on TV about plastic surgery and stuff like this. So we come back from the summer, and Patty is looking great, and the first episode is Boob Job, and it's about how flat-chested she is, and she's going to go out, and Ray wants her to get a boob job. And so they go away for the weekend. Ray and I think Brad go away for the weekend or something. And he comes back, and she suddenly got boobs. And it was her women's lib kind of thing, which Patty is certainly very much into. And he's getting very seductive and all of that. And all of a sudden, she pulls out these socks that are stuffed in her bra, and she's as flat as ever, and throws them at him. And the great thing about that episode is that entire second act is one scene, two people shot in the bedroom. And they did it, I think, in one take. We probably did it twice for that audience. And both of those actors were phenomenal. And it also had a great deal to say about, this enhancement that we're doing and screwing around with nature and all of that, and what is love and what is sex, and so again, it had a lot. But the problem with the show is Patty actually had a boob job, and so it was very hard to make her look flat. And I think they had to kind of pat her a little in the tummy so that her boobs didn't stick out so much. So when she came down the stairs the first time, having had the boob job, we could show cleavage and everything. And then when we got into that scene in the bedroom in the second act, we changed her outfit, I think, into pajamas. And that's when she was able to stuff the socks in there and then throw them out and have baggy, I guess she was in pajamas, baggy pajamas. But it was, again, the thing I admired most, like going back to the Family Ties, My Name is Alex, 2 actors, 1 room, 15 minutes of absolute concentrated dialogue and playing the scene. And I don't think Ray could have done that his first year on that show. And I think he'd be the first to admit that. It was his rapport that he had, having worked with Patty Heaton for however many. That was the beginning of one season. I don't know, it was season 3, season 4, something like that.
So did you get to see the rise of the show in the ranks?
Absolutely, yeah. No, and by the time I left, it was doing really, really well. It was big hit, yeah.
And you moved on to, was it Welcome to New York?
Yeah, I went. I had a chance to go to New York, and we'd lived in New York many years ago, and the offer was just too good to be true. I love Christine Baranski. I'd never met her or worked with her, but I'd worked with these 2 writer-producers, and they just offered it to me, and we had a lunch with Christine and Jimmy Gaffigan out here. We all got along, but Christine was raising 2 teenage girls and insisted on shooting in New York, and Jimmy was basically an up-and-coming New York comic, and they all wanted to shoot it in New York City. So, and I thought, great. So they got me a fabulous apartment in New York, and Patsy got to come in. She was still working at her library, but they'd fly her in occasionally for a 4-day weekend or something like that, or I'd come back here on the hiatus. And it was great. I think it only ran 13 episodes, but it was fun. And she and Linda Lavin and Reba McEntire, and I could go down this list of fabulous women that I have worked with, whom I absolutely adore, who are delicate and lovely and charming, but strong and principled and have a wonderful attitude, a work ethic too. That's the other thing. They just have a great. Christine Baranski has a fantastic work ethic, and Jesus, funny. She's a funny woman.
Okay, we're at the end of our tape, so we'll stop. You were talking about shows scenes where you have 2 actors in a scene for a long period of time. You reminded me of an episode of Family Ties called Birthday Boy. Do you want to say a word or 2 about that?
I love Birthday Boy. First of all, it was written by Michael Whitehorn, who was the youngest writer on Family Ties, who went on to create King of Queens. And it was just great. But it was Michael's birthday. He's turning 18 years old. And he sneaks away over the state line, supposedly to West Virginia, where the drinking age is 18, picks up he and his 2 buddies, Crispin Glover and John Putch, who is Gene Stapleton's son and a dear friend, and they pick up 2 girls, one of whom was played by my agent's wife, present wife. Anyway, so it has such memories, this show. It's a great episode. But the scene you're talking about is at the end when Meredith, his mother, literally comes to the nightclub, and they are pretending they're astronauts. They have convinced these girls that they're 3 astronauts. And the mother of this boy comes into the nightclub and pulls him out of there and takes him home by the scruff of the neck. And they have a down-and-out scene in the kitchen, which is a classic scene. And again, Meredith Baxter and Michael J. Fox, like Ray Romano and Patty Heaton, and all those other wonderful actors, just seeing them do this and rehearsing it and then doing it in the afternoon without an audience, but then it just came alive. And the best classic line I remember, Michael J. Whitehorn's line, is looking at his mother and being whatever, how tall he is, and he goes, "You don't know what you're talking about. I got 18 years under this belt," and I gave him a bit, so just hiking his pants up like he's a cowboy. You know what I mean? Pulling it up around his crotch, like he's the cockiest thing in the world. It brought the house down. So anyway, that's a very fond memory of that episode and 2 wonderful actors. Yeah.
Another show you worked on was Dharma and Greg.
Oh yeah, a lot. I sort of did it off and on for a couple of years. I think the first and second year. Mm-hmm. Enjoyed it. I loved everything, haven't I? We won't talk about the ones I haven't liked. But no, I love my work. I can't believe, anyway, I've been so fortunate. But yes, I love that. I think Jimmy recommended me because he had done the pilot, Burroughs, and he thought I'd be good with those actors. And Jenna Elfman, God bless her, she's just another, puts into the Christine Baranski category. Is just a fun person to work with. And Chuck Lorre is is tough, very demanding, but it was a fun show to do, and we did. I can't remember off and on. I did that. I kept coming back to that and doing it. But it was, and then I had this group of 4 older actors too that I related to: Mimi Kennedy and Susan Sullivan and Mitch, and Alan. I can't, but they were the parents, you know, and they were great. So again, it was a group of actors that I enjoyed. Gary Goldberg taught me a long time ago that one of the biggest problems with 4-camera is sometimes the actors will fight the script, you know, and that's your job, the director. You're in between the writers and the actors don't like the script, the writers want to do this, and you're caught in the middle. Who do you side with? You try to be on the fence, equal, but he said, if you're ever in doubt, go with the actors, because they're the ones you spend the time with, and you have to gain their trust. If they think you're running back and say, those actors they're a real handful, they're terrible, you won't go back. You won't gain their trust. So anyway, yeah, Dharma and Greg, fun.
On September 11th, were you working on that day?
Jesus. No, I was here.
Okay.
I was here. No, I didn't work on September 11th.
Okay, I just want to know if that disrupted your schedule.
I was working when Kennedy was shot.
Oh, yeah?
I was doing a children's show. I was doing a children's show in Washington, D.C. when Kennedy was shot. Yes. Long before your time. Boy, I remember that. No.
Well, okay. Well, we'll move on to Reba now. How did you? You came in now in the second year.
I did. Mm-hmm. They once again. She hadn't found anybody she really gelled with. There were very decent directors, and they do 1 or 2 and stuff like this, and it was on the WB, and you know I was cocky and all of this stuff. I don't know if I want to do this and. Well, my friend Chris Rich played opposite her. I'd done 2 or 3 pilots with Chris Rich, and he played her ex-husband. And Mimi Deaton, who is a wonderful DGA member, was the camera coordinator. And Mimi and Chris went to the producers and say, Reba needs somebody who'll work with the actors. And he's older now, but we think Will would be a good match. And so I get this call, would you like to meet Reba McEntire? Which, shoot, what the hell? Even if I don't get the job, I'd like to meet Reba McEntire. Because, I mean, I wasn't a huge country fan, but I certainly knew who she was, and I knew a couple of her hits and everything. So we had a very nice meeting, and we got along great. And I liked her, and her husband is her manager, Narvel. And so, and that was one of those meetings where the producer, Michael Hannell, and his partner, Mindy, they were there in the meeting. And he said, I first have to ask you, do you still take cream and sugar in your coffee? I went, yeah. He said, do you take 2 sugars and 1 cream in your coffee? Yeah. I used to get you coffee when you worked for Norman Lear, when you did the Barbara Barry pilot with Peter Michael Getz in 1981 or something. I was a gopher, and here he is going to hire me as the exec producer of the show. And the first question, was I nice to you? Yeah. Yes, you were very nice to me. Oh, yeah. So anyway, they hired me, and I did 2 or 3, and then they kept coming back. Well, they'd already filled in their season, but I kept coming back. Reba and I just, we got along great. It was just a meeting of, here she's this gal from Oklahoma, but she is, she's a close friend. We've taken many trips. That's our trip to Ireland. We've gone with her and a bunch of other people, friends of hers. We've been to Tahiti with her. We've been on the Mexican Riviera. Anyway, we've been to their house and they've been here. And she's a dear, gracious, wonderful person. And so I hit it off with her. And
what did she bring to the show comedically?
She's, to me, if she could get a show that writes well for her, she's, to me, the next Lucille Ball. She'll do anything that again is grounded in reality, and she's got that voice and that accent, and she's like Patty Heaton from Oklahoma. You know, she's vulnerable, she's attractive, she can do comedy. She can do physical comedy. I got her to do things on that show, and Chris would pick her up and sling her over his shoulder, and you know, you'd see her butt walking off, she didn't care. In the next scene, she's pulling herself together and pulling her bra down and combing her hair, and she just did everything, and she has no pride. I mean, she knows who she is, and she's a wonderful actress. I hadn't seen the thing she did with Michael Gross about the snakes, coming out of the ground. She did a movie, Tremors. Yes, and I hadn't seen her in that, and I just didn't know she was that good. And when I got the call about the show, I watched a couple of the episodes, and they were okay. But then that year, everything changed, and I came on. Kevin Abbott came on as the producer-director, whom I loved. I hadn't worked with him before, but he, again, was somebody who respected me and my relationship with Reba, and was very concerned with the script, and that was all. I mean, he didn't meddle in the props and the blocking and the camera shots and all of that stuff. He left that to me, which I really appreciated. And it was a very happy experience. I did 5 years on that show. The last year, I wrote her a very personal note, because she had gone to bat with me. She got my salary raised. She went to the business affairs people herself and said, I really want this guy coming back. And I was making a lot less money than I made on Raymond, but I was happy. And I was older, and the hours were short. She has 3 careers, basically. She now has a clothing design business. She's a major country singer and an actress, and she runs the Country Music Awards. She's still toured, and so she wanted to get out. I don't blame her, and she's very willing to work, but 9 o'clock we'd start, 12:30 we'd do a run-through, we'd be done by 1:30, and the camera blocking went pretty fast, and she had a stand-in, and yet she'd never use her because nobody else had a stand-in. So that's Reba,
You were about to tell me you were writing her a letter in that last season?
I wrote her a letter just because I really was wanting to cut down. I really, and I am trying to cut down. But the last season, I just wanted to direct half of them, and it was so great because rather than hire another new director to do the other half, they went into the family. They kept it in the family. The AD turned into it, wanted to direct. Everybody wants to direct. And the technical director wanted to do a couple, and Chris Rich wanted to do some, who I think would be a wonderful director, except he has a wonderful career as an actor. But she said fine. She understood totally. And I wanted to start traveling a little bit, and the commute to Fox was getting to me, and I was just getting tired. And so I just said, I wrote her a letter, and she and Narvel, they totally understood, and that was the end of that. So I did half of them the last season. And
can you talk a little bit about that ensemble too, and also in general how you balance making sure that everyone gets a good part of the show on any ensemble?
The ensemble is fabulous. The person I felt emerged on that show was Steve Howey. He was very shy when I first came on there, and he again has fantastic comic timing for a gorgeous man, and he just needed encouragement. And Chris was sort of the actor father figure on that show, was encouraging him. I went ahead and tried to encourage him as an actor. And Joanna was adorable, who was his wife, who supported him. But we got Steve to just do, I remember the first episode I had, he fell off the roof. And he wanted to do that fall himself. And we finally, I think, let him. But that's when I realized this is a physical comic, and he has great comic instincts. So it's just pulling it out of him and getting his confidence going. And the other one, the little boy Mitch, who is a sweet, wonderful kid, but is somebody that I taught independent activities to, because if you didn't give Mitch something, he would stand there and, hi, Reba, how are you today? I am fine. Well, I'm going to play with my basketball. Boom. And he's the first person to admit this. So I said, Mitch, when you're saying this line, put your coat on. Really? Yeah. Well, and he'd be so worried about that coat that he wouldn't think about being self-conscious in his line. Reba, I'm going to go play with my basketball, and I'm going to meet my buddy Tim at the park. But his mind is on, can I get my sleeve in, not what the line is, you see. So he was a perfect example of keep him busy, keep him moving, and he'll be more natural. And you'd see him around the set, and he's playing with his Game Boy, and he's running after Steve Howe, whom he adored, and all of this stuff. So it was a very happy set because of Reba McEntire. You know, you've got a major star coming in to do a sitcom, and she loved it. She was the first person there in the morning. She would go off. She'd leave the set on a Friday night. They'd get on a private jet, fly to Indianapolis. She'd have a concert Saturday night. Sometimes she'd fly to Cleveland, do a concert Sunday afternoon, get back on the jet, fly home Monday night. Said, I played for 50,000 people on Indianapolis. I played for 40,000 in Cleveland. And she'd know her lines on Monday. Because we shot Monday and Tuesday. And she'd know her lines. And some of these other actors were a little iffy. And I go, hey, Reba's done 2 concerts this weekend. Hello. Let's get it up. To me, the star, the attitude the star has, and the writer-producer, as well as the director, is the 3 most important things. You know, you've got to bring that energy, lovability, and then make it so you can fail on that set. You will try. Melissa Peterman, God bless her, she will do anything. I mean, she'll try anything. Some of it is not right at all for the scene, but I want to tell her, try it. I'll give you bits that are awful. Try it. We won't know until we do it. So you're creating an atmosphere where people can fail.
Now, she had a weight loss during the run. Was that
Melissa? Oh my God, we came
during
back
the hiatus,
during the hiatus. Yes, during the summer hiatus. She and Scarlett both. I mean, Scarlett went anorexic on us. You know, so it was just lost because Scarlett Palmer. That was the first one. We came back one hiatus, and Scarlett was absolutely skin and bone, and they wouldn't let her. Fox wouldn't let her film until she, and then months later, she finally came back having gained some weight. But she was going through a lot. And then Melissa had a baby and gained a tremendous amount of weight and was upset with herself. And so she went on a crash diet of exercise, and she still kept it off. I just saw her the other day. And I don't know how much she weighed, but she lost a lot of weight. So, but a lovely woman, and she and Reba are still very close. She's now out on tour with Reba, as an opening act for Reba's country songs.
And can you talk a little bit about the tone of that show? I mean, it wasn't a nuclear family like Family Ties, and yet it still had sort of a wholesome quality about it.
It does, and so many people that I talk to say, "Oh, it's playing now on USA, I think, one of the cable networks," and it is. Even though they're divorced, she and her ex-husband are still unbelievably friendly, and her ex-husband's new wife is now trying to become Reba's best friend. So there's that feeling. But it's a feeling of family, love, and you've got a little boy, and you've got a young lady, and then you've got teenagers, supposedly, who become pregnant, and the mom doesn't kick them out of the house. They have a baby in the house, and she's willing to do all of this stuff. So it's basically about love. I go back to the Gary Goldberg statement that he said about Tina Yothers when, I can't remember the name of her character, but if it's important to Jennifer, if it's important to Jennifer, it's going to be important to the audience. If the audience loves this show, the fact that Jennifer's school trip to the firehouse is canceled and she comes home depressed, you'll be upset for her. That if Mitch's Holloman's baseball team loses and he comes home in tears, it hurts you, even though it's a tiny problem in our eyes. But that's that family, and so that's an old-fashioned family comedy that the CW never should have canceled. It's just, we don't have to get into that.
Now, when it was coming toward the last episode, was there any talk about at all about Brock and Reba getting back together?
I don't think so. I'm trying to remember. Did I do the last? I don't think I did the last episode. God, I don't remember. But no, and I kept wondering that too. I kept thinking it was like Diane and Sam and Diane. Wouldn't that be neat if they came back and kind of, and they flirted with each other all the time, and you could see there were little sparks there. But they kept keeping him as, the one who was under Barbara Jean's thumb all the time.
Well, was it emotional doing the last episodes?
Oh yeah, God, it was.
End of the run?
Oh, gosh, and it shouldn't have. I think Reba didn't want it to end. The CW had taken over the WB, and they really weren't interested in an old-fashioned family comedy. They wanted a hip urban network. They wanted to be a hip urban. And God knows we weren't hip and urban, and so we were gone. But now, I don't know.
And also during this period, you were doing Scrubs.
I was
sort of on and off. How did that schedule work out?
I loved it. That was single camera. That is single camera, and it was hard because I was doing almost all the Rebas at that time. So on a hiatus, or if they'd have a 2-week hiatus, Bill Lawrence, who created Scrubs, was on a show with Gary Goldberg called Champs, and he was a young writer at that time, and so he created Scrubs, and he'd been a fan, and he'd always tried to get me over there, and I was busy at the time, and I couldn't, and so I finally did one Scrubs on a hiatus, and geez, we all got along. It was just, I love Zach, and that year I had done Reba and Bram and Alice, which was a show with Alfred Molina for Chris Lloyd, Alfred Molina and Traylor Howard, and the co-producer writer was Adam Braff, who's Zach's brother. The wardrobe mistress on Reba is Adam's wife. So Zach used to introduce me as the Braff family director because I was doing Scrubs, Bram and Alice, and Reba all in the same season, which was really fun. But Scrubs was a joy to do. For me at that time, and that's now 5 years, I was then about 64, and it was hard, even though it's right around the corner. When you shoot, you're shooting 14, 15 hours a day, and that was always hard, just keeping those hours. And I do maybe 2 a year, and he would get me to do 2, and and then this musical came out of the blue. Want to talk about that?
Yeah, we'll talk about that episode. You got a nomination for that. Yeah.
It was fun. The lady who wrote it, Deborah Fordham, I'd written a script the year before that she had done, and she was on the set with me. Usually the person who writes the script stays on the set. And we'd gotten along great. And she knew that I'd had a fairly long musical theater background, and so she sent me this thing up in Maine. I go to the summer in Maine, and she said, Bill wants to do a musical. I've written this. I've sent it off to the boys who wrote Avenue Q, and they love it. And I've actually written lyrics. They're going to write tunes. They're going to rewrite my lyrics. We're going to try to shoot it in 7 days. Are you interested? Oh. So I read it, and it was adorable. And I said, yes, definitely. So I said, fine. So we emailed back and forth for months, and then we hired a choreographer, Lance, who had done a little tiny segment. They did a takeoff on West Side Story one time. They had a very short thing, and he had done it. So the line producer asked me, is it okay if this guy Lance does Lance McDonald? And I met him, and I liked him very much. Very sweet man. So he did the choreography. So they had. We closed down for a week of rehearsal, and so they were in regular production. The first day of rehearsal, we started teaching them the songs, and they were going to pre-record. They went to the studio to pre-record, and we started dance rehearsals on this week. Judy Reyes broke her hip, fractured her hip the first day of rehearsal, and she has this big tango number in the thing. Oh my God! But anyway, the rest of them are all in the opening. They all have these other numbers to do, and my wife is helping me a lot at home, giving me some ideas, because I staged the smaller numbers and Lance staged the really big choral numbers. And then they gave us some time to actually rehearse, which was very unusual. And John Inwood, the cinematographer, and I would take a little camcorder, and we shot the rehearsals and went back and figured out all the camera shots and things like that. So it became a full-fledged big musical production, And the cast loved it. I mean, they loved doing it. None of them are singer-dancers, as you can see, but Donald Faison moves beautifully, and Kenny Jenkins had done a Broadway show. He'd done Big River. So he, was familiar. Sarah had actually studied ballet up in Canada. Sarah, what's her, Chalk, thank you. Sarah Chalk. Anyway, so they'd all had a history, and Zach had been to theater camp. That was his contribution. That's why we put that line in at the very end, who was the best singer? I went to theater camp when Zach had gone to theater camp in the Catskills back in New York. Zach had auditioned for a TV movie I did for the Disney Channel years ago, and Patsy was looking through our casting information a long time ago, and he was a child actor. And Zach Braff, and I'd written down some comment about it. He got a call back, but I didn't hire him. We hired David Faustino, who had just come off of Married with Children. But it was about these teenagers, and it was a show down in Georgia, all about bigotry and choir boys, choir music and stuff. So I was able to say to Zach, "Yes, I know you. I rejected you, Zach, on a movie of the week, only whatever it was, 12, 14 years ago." But anyway, that was a great fun. And my biggest regret is that Deborah didn't get a nomination. I felt the show should have gotten a nomination. It was one of those things where I'm going, why am I getting this now? I'm the old man, and I think I was thrilled to get it, and I'm sorry I didn't win it, but I would have given all the credit to everybody who, again, worked on the show, who helped me so much with this. And Deborah was with me every second of that show, and she had some wonderful ideas about how she saw this, how she saw that, and was able to kind of tweak me onto some things that I was going to do a classic pan show. Oh no, you know what would be neat? What if you tried this and that? So she, and John Inwood too, their cinematographer over there, who's been there for all 6 years, is a great help. So anyway.
Okay, I have some summing up questions, but we're at the end of the tape, so